He was just expecting appreciation, but they gifted him the most beautiful alien woman in the galaxy. Samuel had been drifting through the Kepler stretch for 3 days when his salvage vessel's proximity alarm decided to have a breakdown of its own. The thing blared like a dying cat, which meant either his sensors had finally given up or something massive was nearby. He smacked the console twice, his preferred troubleshooting method, and the readout clarified itself. Something massive, then. The distress signal came through in a language his translator couldn't quite parse, all clicking consonants and vowel sounds that seemed to exist in dimensions his ears weren't designed to perceive. But distress was universal. Samuel had heard enough of it in his 15 years salvaging the debris fields between colony worlds to recognize the particular flavor of terror beneath the static. He pulled up the visual feed and whistled low. The alien convoy hung in space like a string of pearls about to break, 6 ships in formation around a flagship that was doing something no ship should ever do. It was bending, not metaphorically. The hull rippled in waves, metal flowing like water, as something in its core pulled reality into uncomfortable shapes. "Well, that's not good," Samuel muttered to nobody, because there was nobody else on the Jonah's Mercy to talk to. He'd had a cat once, but Schrödinger had objected to zero gravity and left at the first station. Smart cat. The readings made his stomach drop. Quantum drive collapse. The flagship's main engine was eating itself from the inside out, creating a localized gravitational anomaly that would, in approximately 7 minutes, compress the entire convoy into a sphere roughly the size of Samuel's fist. Probably the rest of the sector too, if the cascade went critical. He should jump away, should fire up his own drives and put as much distance between himself and the impending disaster as physics would allow. That would be the smart thing, the sensible thing, the thing that didn't end with him scattered across 3 dimensions. Samuel opened a channel. "Unknown vessels. This is salvage operator Samuel aboard the Jonah's Mercy. I'm reading a catastrophic quantum drive failure on your flagship. If you can understand me, I might be able to help. And if you can understand me, well, we're all about to have a very bad day together anyway." The response came immediately, the translator now managing something close to comprehension. "Human vessel. Yes. Understanding. Core collapsing. Cannot stop. 6 minutes remaining." 6 minutes, right? Samuel was already pulling up his ship's rather limited arsenal of tools. Magnetic tethers, hull cutters, a welding laser that worked when it felt like it, and a cargo bay full of spare parts held together by hope and recycled duct tape. Nothing that should work against a quantum drive eating itself. But Samuel hadn't survived this long by doing things that should work. "I'm going to try something incredibly stupid," he announced, angling the Jonah's Mercy toward the flagship. "If this works, you owe me a drink. If it doesn't work, nobody will be around to complain about it." 5 minutes. The flagship's distortions were visible now even without sensors. Space itself warping around the vessel like heat haze. Samuel deployed all 4 of his magnetic tethers, the cables unreeling into the void as he approached. This was the stupid part. Quantum drives worked by punching tiny controlled holes into other dimensions. When they collapsed, they punched bigger, uncontrolled holes into every dimension simultaneously. What Samuel was about to attempt violated at least 3 laws of physics and possibly several treaties. He fired the tethers. They latched onto the flagship's hull with satisfying magnetic clangs that reverberated through his cockpit. Then he redirected every spare watt of power from life support, navigation, and his coffee maker into the tethers themselves, turning them into the galaxy's most improvised electromagnetic field generators. 4 minutes. Samuel's cabin temperature began dropping as heat exchangers shut down. His breath misted in front of his face. The tethers glowed white-hot, pumping out enough electromagnetic interference to give the quantum anomaly something else to chew on besides reality. It was like throwing rocks at a hurricane, except the rocks were made of pure electromagnetic fury, and the hurricane was a hole in spacetime. The flagship shuddered. The rippling slowed. Samuel watched his power reserves plummet toward zero and thought about that cat. Wondered if Schrödinger had found a better owner, one who didn't do things like this. 3 minutes. 2. The distortions stabilized, held, then began, impossibly, to recede. The quantum core wasn't collapsing anymore. It was merely critically damaged, which in the grand scheme of things was a significant improvement. Samuel maintained the field until his power reserves hit critical, then shut down the tethers before his ship decided to become part of the problem. His console beeped cheerfully, informing him that he had approximately 30 seconds of life support remaining, and would he like to reroute power from somewhere? Samuel slapped the restart sequence and felt the familiar hum of systems coming back online. Heat returned. Oxygen recyclers kicked in. His coffee maker beeped optimistically. The channel crackled. "Human Samuel, you have saved us. Saved all. You must come. Must receive our gratitude. Must accept our honor." Samuel leaned back in his chair. Muscles he hadn't realized were tensed, finally relaxing. "Listen, that's really not necessary. Just send me coordinates for the nearest." "You must come. Is law, is tradition. We cannot exist in debt without answer." He sighed. Aliens and their traditions. Last time someone had insisted on honoring him, he'd ended up in a 3-day ceremony that involved ritual fermentation and ceremonial nudity. Still, they seemed insistent, and Samuel had learned that arguing with grateful aliens was generally more trouble than just going along with it. Fine, send me docking coordinates. But I'm telling you right now, I don't do well with formal occasions. Last medal ceremony I attended, I accidentally insulted a dignitary's appendages. In my defense, I didn't know those were appendages. The docking bay of the alien flagship was larger than some space stations Samuel had visited, and significantly cleaner than all of them. His boots touched down on a floor that seemed to be made of something between metal and liquid, rippling gently with each step, as if the ship itself was acknowledging his presence. The effect was disorienting. He felt like he was walking on the surface of a very polite puddle. 3 aliens waited for him at the airlock, and Samuel was relieved to see they were at least vaguely humanoid. 2 arms, 2 legs, heads in approximately the right place. He'd once been greeted by a species that was essentially a sentient gas cloud with opinions, and that had made handshakes awkward. "Human Samuel," the center alien announced, its voice translated into something that sounded like wind chimes having an argument. "I am called Theron, voice of the Concordant Fleet. You have performed the greatest service. The quantum core stabilizes even now thanks to your intervention." Samuel tried to smile. "Just doing what anyone with 4 magnetic tethers and a death wish would do. Really, if you could just point me toward the nearest station, I'll get out of your way." "Impossible." Theron's skin shifted colors, cycling through what Samuel's translator unhelpfully labeled as emphatic purple. "You must come before the council. The debt must be answered. It is the oldest law." The other 2 aliens nodded with such vigor that Samuel worried their heads might detach. He sighed. "Lead the way then, but I'm warning you, I'm really not dressed for formal occasions." He gestured at his jumpsuit, which had oil stains in 3 different colors and a patch on the knee that read, "My other ship is also a piece of junk." They led him through corridors that defied geometry in ways that made his eyes water. Walls curved into impossible angles. Doorways opened onto spaces that seemed larger than the rooms containing them. And at one point, Samuel was fairly certain they walked across a ceiling for about 30 meters, though gravity remained politely downward throughout. The ship's interior was beautiful in an alien way. Bioluminescent panels pulsed with soft light, and the air smelled like ozone and something floral he couldn't identify. "So," Samuel said, because silence made him nervous, and he'd learned that small talk was universal. "Quantum drive failures, huh? That's rough. I knew a guy once who had a micro failure in his drive. Spent 3 days existing in 2 places at once. Said it was convenient for poker, but murder on his dating life." Theron's color shifted to what might have been amusement. "You are very calm for one who faced the probability death. Most species require significant recovery time after confronting dimensional collapse." "Oh, I'll probably have a breakdown about it later," Samuel assured him. "Right now I'm running on adrenaline and the 3-day-old coffee I had before this started. Give me a few hours and I'll be a mess." They arrived at a doorway that was definitely too large for regular use. It opened silently, revealing a chamber beyond that made Samuel stop in his tracks. The room was enormous, its ceiling lost in shadows or possibly other dimensions. Around the perimeter stood beings of at least a dozen different species, some humanoid, others decidedly not. In the center was a raised platform surrounded by a circle of stones that hummed with energy, each one carved with symbols that seemed to move when he wasn't looking directly at them. "Well," Samuel muttered, "this is either a council chamber or the galaxy's weirdest book club." Theron gestured him forward. "The High Council of the Concordant awaits. Please approach the circle of binding." The circle of what now? Samuel's instinct for self-preservation, which had been napping during the whole quantum drive rescue thing, suddenly woke up. That doesn't sound ominous at all. But the aliens were already guiding him forward with gentle insistence, and Samuel found himself stepping into the circle. The stones humming increased in pitch and volume, harmonizing into something that was almost music. The council members turned their various appendages, optical sensors, and one thing that might have been a consciousness projection toward him. A being that looked like it was made of crystallized starlight spoke first. "Samuel of the human species, you have rendered service beyond calculation. You saved not merely our lives, but our purpose, our mission, the very continuation of our people's journey. The debt is absolute." "Really, it's fine," Samuel said, increasingly uncomfortable. "I'm sure you'd have figured something out. Plus, I was in the neighborhood, cosmically speaking." "The debt must be answered," another council member said, this one resembling an upright mantis wearing robes. "It is law older than your species' written history. We have debated and consulted the sacred texts. We have reached consensus." Samuel's stomach sank. The last time someone had reached consensus about him, he'd ended up accidentally married to a sentient asteroid for tax purposes. That had taken 6 months and 3 lawyers to sort out. "We shall give you," the crystalline being continued, and the stones began to glow brighter, "that which we treasure most, that which represents the highest beauty, the greatest value, the most profound gift our culture can bestow." The light from the stones coalesced in the center of the circle, forming a doorway made of pure radiance. Through it walked a figure, and Samuel's brain momentarily forgot how to process visual information. She was humanoid, perfectly so, except for the ears that swept upward in elegant points. Her skin held a luminous green undertone that seemed to contain its own light source, as if she'd been carved from living jade. Her eyes were the color of distant nebulas, deep and unknowable, and they fixed on Samuel with an expression he couldn't read. She wore robes that moved like liquid light, shifting through colors that didn't quite exist in normal space. The council spoke in unison. "We present to you Valentina, known across 10,000 worlds as the most beautiful being in the galaxy. She is your companion, your gift, our answer to the debt that cannot be spoken." Samuel stared. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. Finally he managed, "I really should have just sent an invoice." The Jonah's Mercy had never been designed for 2 people. Samuel had bought the vessel third-hand from a Venusian scrapper who'd sworn it was mostly functional, which in retrospect should have been a warning. The cockpit had 1 seat, the sleeping quarters consisted of a hammock strung between 2 bulkheads, and the sanitation unit worked on a strictly optimistic basis. Now he was supposed to share this flying closet with the most beautiful being in the galaxy, who stood in his cargo bay examining his collection of spare parts with an expression of polite bewilderment. "So," Samuel said, breaking the silence that had stretched for the entire walk back from the flagship, "I should probably explain that I wasn't expecting company, or gifts, or, people." Valentina turned those nebula eyes toward him. When she spoke, her voice had the quality of music played on instruments that shouldn't exist. "You are uncomfortable." "Uncomfortable is a word for it, yeah." Samuel ran a hand through his hair, which was definitely overdue for a cut, and probably had engine grease in it. "Look, I don't know what they told you about this arrangement, but I want to be clear, I didn't ask for this. I mean, not that there's anything wrong with you. You're obviously very, aesthetically successful, but I'm not really the companion receiving type. I'm more of the alone in space, talking to broken engines type." The corner of her mouth twitched. It might have been a smile, though Samuel couldn't be sure. "They told me you were awkward. I did not believe it could be this awkward. Hey, I'm a salvage operator, not a diplomat. My social skills are calibrated for machinery and the occasional drunk trader." He gestured around the cramped space. This is literally all I have. One hammock, one protein synthesizer that makes everything taste like cardboard, and a coffee maker that I value more than most of my organs. The council made it sound like I was some kind of hero, but really I'm just a guy who gets by. Valentina moved through the cargo bay with surprising grace given the low ceiling and scattered equipment. She picked up a torque wrench, examined it with apparent interest, then set it down precisely where she'd found it. The council believes in equivalence. You saved thousands of lives. They gave you what they valued most highly. Me. There was something in her tone, a flatness that didn't match the musical quality of her voice. Samuel caught it. You don't sound thrilled about being the galaxy's most valued gift. Would you be? She turned to face him fully. I have been the most beautiful being in the galaxy since I was 16 cycles old. I have been displayed, admired, painted, sung about, and treated as if I were made of spun glass and wishes. I have been gifted 7 times before. Each time I was returned within a year. Returned? Samuel blinked. Like a broken appliance? Like someone who speaks when she should be silent, who has opinions when she should have grace, who fixes things when she should simply ornament them. Valentina picked up a circuit board from Samuel's workbench, her long fingers tracing the pathways with clear understanding. This is a quantum flux regulator. You've modified it to handle triple the standard load. Elegant work, though the shielding is inadequate for sustained use. Samuel stared at her. You know engineering? I know many things. It does not matter. People see beauty and assume vacancy. She set down the circuit board. You will return me also. They always do. Well, that's depressing. Samuel moved to his coffee maker, his anchor in any crisis. Want some coffee? It tastes like burnt sadness, but it's warm. Yes. He poured 2 cups from the carafe that had been sitting for at least 6 hours, handed her one, and took a long sip of his own. The coffee was indeed terrible. Valentina drank hers without flinching, which earned her points in Samuel's estimation. Here's the thing, Samuel said, leaning against the bulkhead. I don't want a companion I didn't choose. And you clearly don't want to be here. So how about we just don't do this? I'll take you wherever you want to go. You've been gifted 7 times, so there must be somewhere you actually want to be. Valentina was quiet for a moment, studying him over the rim of her cup. You would do that? Refuse the council's gift? I once refused an entire case of Centauri whiskey because it was clearly stolen. Cost me a friendship and a profitable trade route. Principles are expensive, but they're also all I've got. He shrugged. Besides, people aren't gifts. That's just basic decency, which admittedly is in short supply out here. But still, I cannot return. Her voice was soft now. To refuse a placement means to have no placement at all. I would be, she searched for the word, adrift, without purpose in my people's eyes. Samuel looked at her, really looked at her, past the luminous skin and impossible beauty. He saw someone trapped by other people's values, boxed in by expectations she'd never asked for. He knew something about that. Everyone who ended up in salvage work knew something about that. Okay, he said slowly, an idea forming. What if we make a deal? You can stay here as long as you want, not as a companion or a gift or whatever the council thinks this is, just as someone who needs a ride and a place to figure things out. You help me with repairs. Clearly you know your way around a circuit board, and I'll split the salvage profits, 50-50. Partners, not whatever weird arrangement they tried to set up. Valentina's eyes widened slightly, the first genuine surprise he'd seen on her face. You would trust me with your ship? It's not much of a ship to trust someone with. Yesterday I had to reroute power through the bathroom because the main conduits held together with optimism and expired thermal paste. He held out his hand. What do you say? Want to be my business partner instead of my mysterious cosmic gift? She looked at his hand for a long moment, then took it. Her grip was firm, her skin warm despite its jade luminescence. Yes, I accept this arrangement. Great. Welcome aboard the Jonah's Mercy, Valentina. Try not to touch anything that's sparking, and if you hear screaming sounds from the engine room, that's normal. Probably. The way station at Proxima Junction looked like someone had assembled it from spare parts during a drinking contest, which according to local legend was exactly what had happened. 70 years ago, 3 mining crews and a very persuasive smuggler had welded together their broken ships and declared it neutral territory. Now it was a thriving hub of commerce, repairs, and questionable decisions, which made it exactly the kind of place Samuel felt comfortable. Valentina had been aboard the Jonah's Mercy for 2 weeks. In that time, Samuel had learned several important things. First, she really did know engineering. She'd rebuilt his environmental controls in 3 days, using parts he'd been meaning to organize for 3 years. Second, she found his nervousness entertaining, which was both annoying and somehow reassuring. Third, she hummed while she worked, songs from her homeworld that made the ship's metal vibrate in harmonics that shouldn't technically exist. "Why are we stopping here?" Valentina asked as Samuel guided them toward a docking berth. She'd abandoned the flowing robes on day 2, declaring them impractical for crawling through conduits, and now wore a borrowed jumpsuit that Samuel had tried very hard not to notice fit her extremely well. "Information," Samuel said, "and possibly food that wasn't synthesized from recycled water, and hope. There's a guy here who knows everything worth knowing in this sector. He also makes terrible decisions, which means we'll get along great." The guy in question was named Marcus, and he was holding court in the way station's main bar, an establishment called the Singularity's Edge that served drinks in containers ranging from traditional glasses to what appeared to be a small containment field. Marcus himself was 50% original biology and 50% cybernetic enhancements that he'd installed himself during what he called his experimental phase. His left eye was a camera array, his right arm was mechanical past the elbow, and his legs made soft hydraulic sounds when he walked. "Samuel," Marcus boomed as they entered, "you magnificent idiot. I heard you saved a concordant convoy from quantum death. Everyone said you'd finally gotten yourself killed, but I told them, no way, Samuel's too stubborn to die. Death would just give him indigestion." Samuel grinned and clasped Marcus's mechanical hand, which could crush steel, but was calibrated for friendly handshakes. "Good to see you too, Marcus. I need information about the concordant culture, specifically about their gifting traditions." "Oh, this is about her, isn't it?" Marcus's camera eye swiveled to focus on Valentina, who had followed Samuel in and was examining the bar's collection of bottles with scientific interest. "By all the broken stars, the rumors are true. You actually got gifted Valentina. Half the galaxy has songs about her, and you just walk in here like you're discussing engine parts." "She's right here and can hear you," Valentina said without turning around. "Also, these drinks are biologically questionable. This one appears to be alive." "It is alive. That's the point." Marcus laughed, a sound like grinding gears that had somehow learned joy. "I like her. She's got sense. Most people who look like that don't have sense. Samuel, you beautiful disaster, how did you manage this?" Samuel quickly explained the rescue, the ceremony, and the current arrangement, editing out the more embarrassing parts. Marcus listened with his full attention, which meant his various cybernetic components stopped their usual whirring and clicking, making him eerily still. When Samuel finished, Marcus whistled low. "Okay, so here's the thing about the Concordant and their soul debts. It's not just gratitude. When you save them, you save their purpose. They're a multi-generational mission. That convoy is heading toward the galactic rim to establish a new colony. Every person on those ships represents decades of planning, genetic diversity, cultural preservation. You didn't just save lives, you saved their entire future." "Which is why they gave me Valentina," Samuel said. "I get it. Big gesture for a big save." "Not quite." Marcus ordered 3 drinks that came in glasses shaped like Klein bottles. "They gave you what they value most, yeah. But here's the part nobody talks about. Valentina had to accept. It's not just the council deciding. She chose to be placed with you." Valentina turned from the bar, her nebula eyes unreadable. "You know a lot about my people's customs. I make it my business to know things. Knowledge is the only currency that appreciates in value out here." Marcus took a long drink from his impossible glass. "The 7 previous placements? You chose all of them too, didn't you? And then you chose to leave each one when they failed to see you as anything but a trophy. Yes. Valentina's voice was soft. Samuel felt something click into place. Wait, so when you accepted being placed with me, you knew what kind of person I was? That I was just a salvage operator with a ship held together by spite? I watched your rescue from the flagship's sensors. Valentina moved to join them, accepting one of the Klein bottle drinks and examining it with fascination. You spoke to your ship while you worked. You apologized to the magnetic tethers for overloading them. You told your coffee maker you'd buy it something nice if you both survived. Most people in the galaxy would have calculated the odds and jumped away. You stayed because it was the right thing to do, and because you thought no one else would do it. That is not a common quality. Marcus grinned. Oh, this is perfect. Samuel, you absolute fool. She chose you because you're too dumb to know when you're outmatched and too stubborn to care. That's not flattering, Samuel protested. It wasn't meant to be. It's accurate. Marcus raised his glass. To Samuel, who saves quantum convoys and doesn't know when someone's actually interested in him instead of just completing a cultural obligation. Valentina raised her glass as well, and there was definitely a smile on her face now. To Samuel, who offered me partnership before he offered me coffee. Wait. Samuel looked between them. Are you saying what I think you're saying? I'm saying, Valentina said patiently, that I have been gifted 7 times to people who saw only beauty. You saw someone who needed options and offered her a job. You're either remarkably enlightened or remarkably oblivious. I haven't decided which. Definitely oblivious, Marcus confirmed, but in a charming way. Samuel, you moron, she likes you. Samuel felt heat rise to his face. He took a drink from his Klein bottle to cover his confusion, discovered it tasted like starlight and regret, and nearly choked. Valentina laughed, an actual genuine laugh that made her eyes crinkle at the corners, and Samuel decided that maybe being oblivious wasn't the worst quality to have. 3 months had passed since the way station conversation, and Samuel's life had become something he didn't quite recognize. The Jonah's Mercy was running better than it had in years, mostly because Valentina had systematically gone through every system and fixed things he'd been ignoring since he bought the ship. His profit margins had doubled because she had an uncanny ability to spot valuable salvage in debris fields that looked like junk to everyone else. And somewhere along the way, his cramped little vessel had started feeling less like a floating coffin and more like a home. They'd fallen into a rhythm. Samuel handled negotiations and flying. Valentina managed repairs and technical analysis. They split the cooking duties, though cooking was a generous term for what the protein synthesizer produced. Samuel had taught her how to coax the machine into making something that almost resembled pasta. Valentina had taught him a breathing technique from her homeworld that helped with the anxiety he got during hyperspace jumps. Currently, they were working on a salvage contract in the Kepler belt, searching for a derelict research station that had gone dark 6 months ago. The client was paying well for any intact data cores, which meant either the research was valuable or extremely illegal. Samuel had stopped asking which years ago. I'm reading something on the lower decks, Valentina said from the co-pilot seat they'd installed last month. She'd rigged it herself using parts from 3 different ship classes, and it shouldn't have worked but did anyway. Energy signature, faint, but it's there. Samuel adjusted their approach vector. The research station tumbled slowly through space. Its hull breached in a dozen places, solar panels shredded by micrometeorite impacts. It looked like every other dead station he'd salvaged, which meant it was probably hiding something interesting. Could be residual power in the backup cells, he said, or it could be someone else already beat us here and left some equipment running. Or it could be a trap, Valentina added cheerfully. She'd developed a dark sense of humor over the past months that Samuel found both disturbing and attractive, which was a combination he was still processing. They suited up in the cargo bay. Samuel's suit was patched in 17 places and had a helmet with a crack he'd sealed with industrial adhesive. Valentina's suit was newer. She'd fabricated it herself from materials she'd traded for at the last station, and it fit her perfectly while somehow managing to include more equipment pouches than should spatially fit on a single garment. You know, Samuel said as he checked his oxygen levels, Most people who look like you do don't spend their time crawling through derelict stations looking for data cores. Most people who look like you do don't rescue quantum convoys, Valentina replied. We are both defying expectations. It's what makes us interesting. They crossed to the station using the magnetic tether, the same ones Samuel had used to save the Concordant convoy. Valentina had reinforced them and added a redundancy system because, as she'd explained, I prefer not to drift into space screaming, thank you. The station's airlock was frozen open, which saved them the trouble of cutting through. Inside, emergency lights flickered weakly, casting everything in intermittent red. Their helmet lamps cut through the darkness as they moved through corridors filled with floating debris, papers, equipment, what looked like someone's lunch from 6 months ago, frozen and preserved in the vacuum. This is creepy, Samuel muttered. I hate stations where everyone just disappeared. Give me a good explosion or hull breach. Those make sense. This is just unsettling. Agreed. Valentina consulted her handheld scanner. The energy signature is coming from the main research lab. 3 decks down. They found the lab without incident, which made Samuel more nervous than if they'd encountered actual problems. Problems he understood. Smooth operations made him suspicious. The lab door was sealed but still had emergency power. Valentina interfaced with the control panel, her fingers dancing across the keys with practiced efficiency. Someone locked this from the inside, she said. Recently, within the last few hours. Samuel's hand went to the plasma cutter on his belt. I thought you said this place went dark 6 months ago. I said it went dark. I didn't say it stayed dark. The door hissed open, and they entered carefully. The lab was intact, weirdly pristine compared to the rest of the station. Equipment hummed softly, displays showing active readouts, and in the center of the room stood a young woman in a research uniform, very much alive and pointing what looked like a homemade weapon at them. Stay back, she shouted. Her voice crackled over the radio. I don't know who sent you, but the research isn't for sale. Samuel raised his hand slowly. Easy there. We're just salvagers. Got a contract to retrieve data cores. Didn't realize anyone was still alive in here. Salvagers? The woman didn't lower her weapon. The last salvagers who came here tried to kill me and take everything. Why should I believe you're different? Well, for one, we're having a conversation instead of shooting, Samuel pointed out. That's already more civilized. I'm Samuel, this is Valentina. We're with the Jonah's Mercy, registered salvage operator, fully licensed and everything. The woman's eyes flicked to Valentina and widened. You're Valentina. The Valentina. What are you doing on a salvage ship? Being exceptional at salvage, Valentina said dryly. It's my current defiance of expectations. What are you doing alone on a dead research station? The woman finally lowered her weapon slightly. My name is Chen. I'm a xenobiologist. We were studying samples from the galactic rim when the station was attacked. Everyone else evacuated, but I stayed to protect the research. Someone's been trying to steal it. Corporate raiders, I think. They keep sending ships. Samuel processed this. So you've been here for 6 months, alone, fighting off raiders to protect some biological samples? They're not just samples. Chen's voice was passionate now. They're a potential cure for Vortan plague. Do you know how many colonies that disease has wiped out? If I let some corporation steal this and lock it behind patents, millions die. Valentina and Samuel exchanged glances. Samuel sighed. Valentina, please tell me you're not thinking what I think you're thinking. I'm thinking, Valentina said, that we should help her transport the research to someone who will actually use it. A university, maybe, or a public health institute. That wasn't the contract. The contract was for data cores. It didn't specify whose cores or what we do with them after retrieval. Valentina smiled. We could fulfill the contract, get paid, and then ensure the research goes where it should go. Everyone wins, except the client, who is probably the corporate raider Chen mentioned. Samuel looked at Chen, who was watching them with desperate hope, then at Valentina, who had that expression she got when she was about to do something righteous and complicated. He thought about his simple life before all this, when it was just him and broken engines and no moral complications. Fine, he said, but if we get shot at, I'm blaming both of you. 6 months after rescuing Chen and her research, Samuel found himself doing something he'd sworn he'd never do, attending a formal ceremony. The University of New Geneva had insisted on honoring the people who delivered the Vortan plague cure to them, instead of letting it disappear into corporate vaults. Samuel had tried to refuse. Valentina had physically pushed him onto the shuttle. Now he stood in an auditorium filled with scientists, diplomats, and various species he couldn't identify, wearing a suit that Valentina had somehow procured and that fit him suspiciously well. She stood beside him in formal robes that shifted colors like her original gift-giving outfit. Except these she'd made herself, and they had pockets. Lots of pockets. Samuel had learned that Valentina's definition of formal wear included sufficient storage for emergency tools. "I hate this," Samuel muttered as someone from the university droned on about heroism and sacrifice and principles. "I know," Valentina said. "You've mentioned it 17 times. But Chen deserves recognition, and we're part of the story whether you like it or not." Chen sat in the front row, beaming. She'd already received 3 research grants and multiple job offers. The cure was being distributed free to every colony that needed it. Samuel had to admit, even if he wouldn't say it out loud, that it felt good to have done something that mattered beyond just getting by. The ceremony eventually ended, and they escaped to the university's observation deck, a transparent dome overlooking the planet below. Samuel breathed easier away from the crowds. Valentina joined him at the railing, her pointed ears catching the light from the planet's 2 moons. "You've changed," she said quietly. "When I met you, you would have taken the money from the corporate client and walked away. When you met me, I was a guy who talked to his coffee maker." Samuel watched a shuttle launch from the surface, its engines leaving a bright trail against the darkness. "Now I'm a guy who talks to his coffee maker and occasionally does the right thing. That's growth, I guess." "You were always going to do the right thing. You saved the Concordant convoy without hesitation." Valentina's hand found his on the railing. "You just didn't realize that doing the right thing could apply to more than emergency situations." Her touch was warm, familiar now after months of working side by side in the cramped confines of the Jonah's Mercy. Samuel had stopped being nervous around her somewhere around week 8, right after she'd accidentally magnetized herself to the ceiling while repairing a power conduit, and he'd laughed so hard he couldn't breathe. She'd laughed too, hanging upside down, her hair defying gravity in ways that shouldn't work but did, because alien biology was weird. "Can I ask you something?" Samuel said. "That first day when the council presented you, you looked so sad. I've been wondering about that." Valentina was quiet for a moment, her nebula eyes reflecting the stars. "I was sad because I thought it would be the same as the other 7 times. Someone would see beauty and nothing else. I would be ornamental until I became inconvenient, then returned like a gift receipt." She turned to face him fully. "But then you offered me coffee and a job before you even tried to process what was happening. You saw a person who needed options, not a treasure to be kept." "I'm an idiot," Samuel said. "Marcus was right about that. I didn't even realize you were interested in me until he spelled it out. You're not an idiot. You're honest in a galaxy that usually isn't." Valentina smiled. "Though you are remarkably oblivious. I rebuilt your entire environmental system in 3 days, and you thanked me like I just swept the floor. In my defense, I didn't know that was flirting. I thought you were just being helpful." Samuel paused. "Was that flirting?" "Yes, Samuel. Completely redesigning your life support to run at optimal efficiency was flirting. In my culture, there is no greater declaration of interest than ensuring someone can breathe properly. That explains so much about why all my relationships have failed." Samuel laughed, then grew serious. "So what happens now? We've been partners for months, good partners. But I don't know what we're doing beyond that." Valentina stepped closer. "What do you want to be doing?" Samuel thought about the past 6 months. The easy companionship that had developed between them, the way she hummed while working, and he'd started humming along without realizing it. How she took her coffee exactly as terrible as he did, and they'd turned it into a competition to see who could drink the worst pot without flinching. The night they'd been stuck in a debris field, waiting for a radiation storm to pass, and she'd told him stories about her homeworld, while he told her about growing up on a mining station where the recyclers broke down monthly and everyone learned engineering or suffocated. I want, Samuel said carefully, to keep flying the Jonah's Mercy with you, taking jobs, fixing things, occasionally saving people when my hero complex acts up. I want to keep splitting the profits 50-50, even though you do most of the work. I want to wake up in our extremely cramped ship and know you're there, probably already awake and improving something I didn't know needed improving. Our ship, Valentina repeated softly. You said our ship. Yeah, I did. Samuel felt his heart beating faster. Somewhere between the quantum convoy and fighting off corporate raiders, the Jonah's Mercy stopped being mine and started being ours. If you want that, if you want to stay. Samuel, Valentina's hand came up to his face, her fingers cool against his cheek. I chose to be placed with you because I saw someone genuine. I chose to stay because you gave me choice itself. I choose now to keep choosing you every day for as long as you'll have me. She kissed him then, and Samuel discovered that kissing someone with pointed ears was exactly the same as kissing anyone else, except better because it was Valentina, and she tasted like terrible coffee and stardust, and every good decision he'd accidentally made. When they finally pulled apart, Samuel was grinning like an idiot. So, partner, what's our next job? There's a distress call from the Andromeda sector, merchant ship with a failing reactor. No one wants the contract because it's low profit and high risk. Valentina's eyes sparkled with amusement. I thought we might take it. Of course you did. Samuel took her hand, and they walked back toward the docking bay where the Jonah's Mercy waited, that beautiful disaster of a ship that had somehow become home. Let's go save some people, fix some things, and probably nearly die in the process. Sounds perfect, Valentina said. And it was, the end. And so we come to the end of another story. Sometimes the greatest gifts in life aren't the ones we ask for, but the ones that allow us to see beyond our expectations. When Samuel rescued that convoy, he thought he was just doing his job, never imagining it would lead to a partnership that would change everything. Valentina had been seen as a treasure her whole life until she met someone who saw her first as a human being. So what about you? What would you do if you were offered something incredibly valuable that you never wanted? Like Samuel, would you have the courage to redefine it on your own terms? Or would you let others' expectations dictate what that gift should mean? And if you were Valentina, even after 7 disappointments, would you continue to choose people who can finally see the real you? If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to Sci-Fi Pulse for more stories from around the universe.